Hi, I'm Marceline, and I guess if I had stayed quiet, maybe they'd still be collecting checks off my name. They said my sister deserved the fortune, the parties, the framed photographs. I was the one behind the curtain, holding her crown, smiling in the background. But the day I asked, why does she get everything and I get nothing? My mother set me on fire, literally, and filmed it, for insurance. They called it a tragic accident, but the camera was already rolling when the flame was lit. How many years can someone erase you before they try to collect on your silence? Would you like to know what I did next? People in Savannah love to talk. They talk about church picnics, who got engaged last weekend, and which family bakes the best pecan pie. And when they talk about the Hartleys, my family, they lower their voices like they're whispering reverence. God-fearing, they say, graceful, always put together. But no one ever asked what it cost to keep that image polished. It was a Sunday in early October when the illusion cracked a little more. The sun was dripping through magnolia branches, and the house smelled of roast chicken, honey carrots, and Velma's lemon biscuits, the kind people beg her to bring to bake sales. Guests were milling through the dining room, admiring the framed photographs lining the walls. My sister Zinnia's pageant ribbons, Velma at a charity gala, our family dressed in all white, standing before the church on Easter. And then there was the newest frame, a professional photo, clean, bright, almost too perfect. Everyone in it beamed, Velma at the center like some southern monarch, Zinnia glowing in her white lace dress, and me, I wasn't there. Maybe I blinked, I said, my voice more question than statement. Velma turned, her tone as smooth as the frosting on her pound cake. Oh, honey, you were standing behind the post. The photographer couldn't get a clean shot of you. Maybe next time stand taller. She smiled like she'd just given me the kindest suggestion in the world. Zinnia snorted into her napkin. She always fades into the background, don't you think? Everyone laughed. I didn't. That night, after the dishes were done and the guests gone, I wandered into the hallway. The house had that heavy stillness old places hold at night, like they remember every word said during the day and weigh them against your silence. I opened the side cabinet where Velma kept the family albums, rows of them, Christmas, 4th of July, Zinnia's first solo at church. I flipped through each page, and there it was, again and again. I was always slightly off frame, sometimes cropped. Once a frame had been slid over half my face. I pulled one of those photos out, took a picture with my phone, and slid it back in. That was the night I began documenting what it meant to be a ghost in your own home. A week later, Zinnia was honored at church as the young woman of purpose. Velma beamed beside her as they lit candles. I sat in the last pew, right next to the aisle fan that hummed loud enough to drown out whatever the pastor was saying. A woman tapped Velma on the shoulder. "Is this your only daughter?" she whispered, nodding at Zinnia. Velma didn't blink. She just smiled and said, "Yes, she's our pride." I didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared ahead at the stained glass. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? If a daughter is erased and no one corrects the record, does she still exist? There had been signs before. School newsletters that left my name out. Thank you cards from the PTA that only went to Zinnia. A teacher once asked if I was the helper girl when I dropped off homework for my sister. But last week, I overheard Velma talking to one of her friends from church on the porch. I didn't mean to listen, but the window was cracked, and her voice floated in like poison disguised as perfume. "She's a sweet girl," the woman said. Velma replied, "Only one daughter worth the frame, Marlene. The rest? Well, you know how it is." My breath caught. Not from shock, but from confirmation. I didn't even make the sign-up sheet for the community cleanup this month. Velma had filled it out, of course. She never forgets Zinnia's name. That night, I started journaling. Not for therapy, for record-keeping, dates, times, events, omissions, proof that I existed, that I showed up, that I was real, even when they refused to see me. Sometimes I'd think, maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe I'm being dramatic, but then something would happen. Zinnia would get a new dress, and I'd be told we were tight on funds, or I'd offer to help at church and get assigned to clean up while Zinnia handed out the microphones. I wasn't paranoid, I was being erased, one well-mannered excuse at a time. The day before Thanksgiving, Velma put up the Christmas card display in the front hall. Every family that sent us a card got theirs clipped to a string of fairy lights. I found the one I made last year, hand-cut snowflakes, our names written in gold. Only 2 names were visible, Velma and Zinnia. Mine had been folded under. I didn't say anything, just folded it tighter and walked away. Because sometimes fire doesn't start with a match. Sometimes it begins with the silence after your name is forgotten. And sometimes that silence gets loud enough to choke you. I closed my bedroom door gently behind me that night, letting the weight of the house settle into its usual hush. The air was thick with whatever perfume Velma had sprayed before church. Too sweet, too sharp. I slipped off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my dress. I couldn't shake the image of that photo from earlier, my space missing like it had been erased with intention. The walls in this house remember. They echo not with sound, but with absence. I laid there in the dark, staring up at the cracked ceiling. Around midnight, I heard Velma's voice float through the vent. At first, I thought she was praying, but the cadence was too soft, too strange. "Only one needs to be remembered," she murmured. "The rest aren't real." I didn't move, didn't breathe too loud, just kept my eyes on the ceiling, willing it to collapse and end the weirdness of that moment. But the ceiling stayed intact, and so did the dread crawling under my skin. What kind of mother dreams about erasing her own child? By morning, the strange fog still hadn't lifted. Velma was at the kitchen table, sipping her tea like the night before hadn't happened. She gave me her usual glance, not hostile, not warm, neutral, polished, masked. "Did you sleep all right?" she asked without looking up. I slid into the chair across from her. "Yeah. You ever have weird dreams?" She blinked slowly. "Dreams reveal who we really are. I never forget mine." She smiled, wide and measured. "Why? Did you hear something?" My spoon hit the edge of my bowl harder than I meant. "Just curious. I read that somewhere." I started keeping track of her mutterings after that. Not obsessively, just enough. Enough to understand that Velma said more in her sleep than she ever did wide awake. A week later, I helped her at the flower shop. Her assistant had called in sick, and Velma refused to close early. I sorted daisies and arranged tulips while she tapped on her office laptop. The air smelled like eucalyptus and bleach. As I reached for ribbon, the printer beside me whirred to life. I didn't mean to look, but when your own name stares up at you from a printed form, you don't ignore it. It was an insurance document. New. Fresh ink. Insured. Marceline Drexel. Beneficiary, Velma Hartley. Policy date, my last birthday. My blood ran cold, but I didn't flinch, just folded the paper neatly and placed it back in the tray. She didn't get me cake this year, said she was watching sugar. But apparently, she got me covered. I remembered that day clearer now. How she handed me a single candle in a ceramic holder. "Go light it," she'd said. "Make a wish for your future." Meanwhile, she stayed in the dining room on her phone, laptop open. I stood in the kitchen lighting my own candle while wishing for something I couldn't name yet. That night hadn't been a quiet oversight. It had been something else. After the shop closed, I stayed behind under the guise of organizing receipts. Velma left early, said she had a church finance meeting. I knew what that meant. She'd be gone for hours, dressed up to maintain appearances, ready to hold court in a room where no one knew what she was hiding. In her office, I found a drawer locked. Took less than 3 minutes to jimmy it open with the back of a pen and the edge of a letter opener. Inside were old policies. One was for Zinnia, canceled 4 years ago. Mine, still active, recently updated. There was a note paperclipped to it, Velma's handwriting unmistakable. "If something happens, move quick." I sat there, blinking. Then I carefully returned everything to its place and closed the drawer without a sound. When I got home, I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I just stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair, and asked myself quietly, if something happened to me, what would they say? Maybe they'd call it a freak accident, Maybe a tragic fall, a faulty wire, an unattended candle, and I'd be gone. Just a brief paragraph in a church newsletter with my name spelled right for once, unless I stopped it first. Before I went to bed, my phone buzzed with a notification. Auto payment confirmed. Accident coverage policy. 2 million. My name was the flame. That number kept echoing in my head. Not as money, but as motive. I passed Velma's office with the same careful steps I took walking across the sanctuary floor in church, measured, quiet, deliberate. Inside, her blinds were drawn halfway like always. She didn't like anyone seeing her work, even though she was the kind of woman who made sure the world saw everything else. The desk light was on, but she wasn't in the room. I didn't go in. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed a pattern. That night, I dressed in a plain navy blouse and jeans, nothing too showy. Velma hated showing off, unless it was Zinnia doing the showing. We were attending the First Baptist Community Fundraiser, held annually in the Fellowship Hall. I helped set up chairs like I did every year, stacking programs, aligning hymnals just right. Zinnia arrived late, in a pink silk dress with heels too high for a church function. Velma beamed. "There she is, our future," she announced to no one in particular, and everyone at once. During the dinner, I sat 2 seats down from Velma. She didn't speak to me, but I could hear her rehearsed lines. Zinnia's been doing incredible work with the youth ministry, and she's being considered for the Community Leadership Scholarship. Then came the part that split the room like a blade through hush puppies. Pastor Ellis stepped up to the podium. "We're honored tonight to recognize one of our own," he began. "The recipient of the Alcott Legacy Fund, awarded to a young woman of vision and dedication, Miss Zinnia Hartley." Applause rose like a wave, catching me mid-sip. I swallowed too fast, clapped slowly, smiled, because that's what ghosts do in public. My cheeks stiffened before the sting in my chest even registered. I remembered another gathering, 4 years earlier, when we sat in that same hall to watch a video tribute to our late father. It was supposed to be his final message to us. Velma had insisted it only be played once. In it, he looked tired but kind. "To my beloved daughter Zinnia," he'd said, "the estate is yours to continue what we've built." Then the screen faded to black. No mention of me, not one word. Later that night, I asked Velma quietly, "Did he record more?" She shook her head without looking up from her phone. "He must have forgotten, baby. Don't take it personal." But I never forgot. 3 days after the fundraiser, while reorganizing the pantry Velma never touched, I found a flash drive shoved behind a row of expired multivitamins. It was labeled in my father's handwriting. Dad, raw cut. I waited until midnight to play it. The same video, same chair, same background. But at 6 minutes and 14 seconds, he paused, looked off camera, then back again. "Make sure Marceline knows she'll always have a home," he said. "Not just the house, my name. She's part of it." I stared at the screen. That line was gone from the version played at church, gone from the file Velma claimed was final. I whispered to no one, so he didn't forget. She deleted me. I made 3 encrypted copies of that video, one on my laptop, one in cloud storage, and one on a drive hidden in my car's tire well. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet. But I knew one thing. Velma rewrote the truth once. She wouldn't do it again. The next morning at breakfast, I stirred my coffee without drinking it. I said aloud, "If something ever happened to me, would anyone even check?" Velma glanced up. "Why would something happen to you?" "No reason," I replied. "Just a thought." Zinnia rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic lately. Seriously." I made a mental note. Velma deflected. Zinnia dismissed. It wasn't the first time they worked in tandem. Years ago, I had won the District Science Award for a project on sustainable farming. The ceremony was hosted in our high school auditorium. Before it started, Velma had pulled my teacher aside. "She's a shy one," she whispered, hand resting dramatically over her heart. "Don't call her up. She'll get overwhelmed." Instead, Zinnia was brought up. She did a 5-minute speech about sisterhood and support, and took the certificate meant for me. That night, Velma said, "You helped her shine. That's something to be proud of, baby." As if I'd chosen the shadows on purpose. Now, years later, I lay in bed staring at the flash drive under my pillow. They rewrote history once, I thought, but this time, I'm the editor. The next morning, I was folding laundry when a knock echoed from the front door. I opened it to find Elder Beckley from the church, holding a folder. "Velma said you might help with estate inventory this week?" I blinked. "Estate inventory?" He nodded. "Oh, I thought you knew. They're finalizing the legacy transfer." And just like that, I knew. They weren't done erasing me. I hadn't even known there was a transfer happening, let alone that it might include me, or erase me for good. I shut the front door behind me slowly, pressing my back to the wood as if it might push the truth out of my head. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and artificial cinnamon, the way Velma liked it. Controlled, sanitized. I walked past the living room, past the framed lies, and up the stairs with the kind of quiet that doesn't come from courtesy, but calculation. They'd started transferring the estate. My father's legacy, without a word to me, no panic, not yet. That evening, I called the church office, asking if I could see the legacy record Velma had referenced. The assistant on the phone hesitated. "That's not usually public, Miss Drexel," she said slowly. "But I suppose an overview wouldn't hurt." She emailed it within the hour. The first page was my father's original plan, hand-signed, dated. My name was there, beside Zinnia's, equal shares. A note. "Both girls hold my name. Both girls hold my future." Page 2 was dated just 6 months after his death. Zinnia only. Me. Removed. No note. No justification. Just a clean subtraction. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I printed both pages and laid them on my desk like exhibits in a trial I hadn't yet announced. That night, I couldn't focus. My thoughts swirled, skipping from memory to memory, pausing only when I smelled something. A hiss. It was faint, like a whisper trapped in metal. I followed it into the kitchen. The gas stove knob was halfway turned. The burner was off, but gas flowed steadily into the room. Every window shut. The carbon monoxide alarm, unplugged. I stood frozen for a moment, then crossed the floor and twisted the knob firmly to off. The silence that followed was deeper than any I'd known. I leaned on the counter, letting my hands absorb the cool surface. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone forgot. But no one else was home. And nothing in this house ever happened by accident. I called Velma from the landline. "Hey, were you cooking earlier?" I asked, tone steady. "Oh no," she said without pause. "I haven't touched the stove today. Must have been Zinnia." "She's not home." Velma laughed lightly. "Maybe I forgot. You know how I get." Then she added, "Why? Did something burn?" "No," I said. "Not yet." I hung up before she could answer. Around 10, Zinnia came back from wherever she always was, probably rehearsals or someone's photo shoot. She dropped her keys on the side table and called out, "Why does it smell weird in here?" "Maybe the air's just off today," I said from the hallway. "Old houses hold things." She shrugged and went upstairs. If I said it aloud, what I suspected, someone would call me paranoid, but if I stayed quiet, I might not wake up next time. That night, as I lay under my blanket, memories flickered like heat lightning. High school. Awards night. The night Zinnia was praised on stage for a design I had created. I'd done the research. She'd done the speech. Before the ceremony, Velma had pulled aside the event coordinator. "She's shy," she said, gesturing toward me. "Doesn't like attention. Zinnia's better with the mic." That lie was small, smooth, but it stuck. Like gum under a shoe, irrelevant until it catches you mid-step. I woke early the next day and walked downstairs while the house still slept. I wrote a note and stuck it behind the stove knob. "Please check gas knobs. Safety matters." Velma read it that morning. She didn't ask about it. Didn't comment. She just smiled and handed me a cup of coffee. "Black, no sugar, just the way you like it," she said with a warmth I'd stopped trusting. That evening, after dinner, I climbed into bed early. My eyes closed, but my mind didn't still. Then came the sound. Footsteps outside my room, not Zinnia's. Lighter. A whisper followed. She's asking too much. I sat up fast, swung my legs over the side, opened the door. No one there, but on the carpet, directly in front of my door, was a matchbox. No logo, no dust, no explanation. We didn't keep matches in the house. We didn't smoke. But there it was, and I knew. The only flame in the house was me. And maybe they were ready to light it. The only flame in the house was me. And maybe they were ready to light it. I woke before the sun, air still and the sky gray-blue with that just before dawn stillness. I wrapped the matchbox in a pair of wool socks and shoved it deep into the back of my drawer. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't throw it away. Evidence. Or maybe just confirmation that I hadn't imagined everything. I didn't bother with breakfast. I grabbed my keys and coat and drove straight to the outskirts, toward the only person left in this world who might tell me the truth without spinning it like sugar. Henrietta's porch light was still on, casting a soft yellow hue over the chipped railing. She opened the door before I even knocked. "I knew you'd come," she said softly, stepping aside. She didn't ask why. She didn't say, "Good morning." Just motioned me in with that same tired grace she always had. Inside, the air smelled like peppermint tea and wood polish. Her living room hadn't changed in a decade. Knitted throws, stacks of books, a fading wedding photo of her and my grandfather on the mantel. She sat across from me, silent at first, then said, "I was hoping I'd never have to give you this." From the side table drawer, she pulled out an envelope, yellowed at the corners, sealed with old glue that had long since dried. "Your daddy gave me this," she said, her voice quieter than the radiator hum. "Told me, if your mother ever reverted, I was to pass it to you." My hands trembled as I took it. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it was. Inside was a single folded sheet. My name written at the top, in his unmistakable slanted script. "Marceline, if you're reading this, it means I didn't stop her in time." I swallowed hard, eyes scanning down as the words pulled me under. Velma's always had her ways. You know that. It started young. Her obsession with order, with image. When she's scared, she controls. When she feels slighted, she erases. It's not about you. It's never about you. But you're the one who bears it. You were never the spare, Mars. You were my marrow, my balance. The only one who watched quietly and still saw the whole picture. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder. I thought I had more time. I thought she'd settle after Zinnia was born. I thought wrong. Don't let her define your future with her fear. Your name matters. Use it. I stared at the page until the words blurred, then folded it slowly and slid it back into the envelope. Henrietta handed me a tissue without speaking. I wiped my eyes, only once. "Someone saw me," I said, "even if it was too late." She nodded. "Your daddy never forgot you, not for a second." We sat in silence, the kind that holds rather than suffocates. Then she stood and walked to the hall closet. "There's more," she said. Her voice cracked, the first time I'd heard it do so. She opened a locked box and pulled out a plastic sleeve. Inside was a yellowing newspaper clipping. "Teen burned in domestic incident, no charges filed." My stomach flipped. Henrietta hesitated. "Before you were born, there was a boy. James? Foster placement. Your mother said he was troubled, said he caused the accident himself, but I never bought it." I read the article. The words "no foul play suspected" screamed louder than any headline ever could. "James K. Donnelly," I whispered. "Where is he now?" Henrietta shook her head. "I don't know. He vanished from the system. Velma said he was relocated, but I always suspected he wasn't just relocated. He was removed." I left her house an hour later, with the letter in my purse and the article folded in my pocket. Back home, I searched every database I could find, shelter rosters, old news archives, court documents. Finally, I hit something. A shelter in Augusta, a James Donnelly, registered 10 years ago, no exit record. I called. A woman answered. Greenway Transitional. How can I help? Hi. I'm looking for someone, James Donnelly. He may have been a resident years back. Silence. Then, he don't talk to nobody, not anymore. I paused. I'm not just anybody. I'm from the Hartley family. Another silence. Then, he left something in case someone ever called. A message. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What kind of message? The line crackled. He said, if a girl ever comes asking, tell her this. Your fire isn't new, it's inherited. The shelter door creaked open like it knew me already, and maybe, in some twisted way, it did. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a washed-out glow. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee grounds and antiseptic. A middle-aged woman behind the counter looked up when I stepped in, her expression stilling the moment I said my last name. Hartley? She asked. I nodded. She didn't flinch, just reached under the desk, pulled out a labeled envelope, and handed it over. James left this in case someone ever came asking. Inside was a flash drive and a note. Not a letter, not a greeting, just 4 words in shaky handwriting. Clean with her cruelty. Back at the motel, I plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen flickered, then played. James sat in what looked like the same shelter room. His face was older, worn by something deeper than age. His voice was measured. She told me, no one remembers the first mistake if you replace it with a prettier picture. That's how she thinks. Neat. Controlled. Velma doesn't yell. She rearranges the truth. He paused, took a breath. They said it was cooking burns, but there was no stove in my room. I know she knew that. The video ended. I sat frozen in the quiet hum of that motel room. I believed him. Not because he sounded convincing, but because I didn't need convincing. The next morning, I returned to Savannah and made my first stop at the school board office. I'd decided to apply for a community college program and needed my old records. The clerk handed me a thin manila folder. I flipped through it. Tucked inside was something I'd never seen before, a psychological assessment. Bold black letters read, Student exhibits signs of attention-seeking behavior and mild delusional thinking. My stomach clenched. The signature at the bottom, Dr. K. Langford. But I'd never met a Dr. Langford. I'd never been evaluated for anything of the sort. Back home, I pulled out my laptop and typed in the name. Dr. Kenneth Langford, psychologist, deceased, 5 years ago. The report was dated last year. I scanned the document, uploaded it to a handwriting verification site, and waited. Less than 12 hours later, I received a brief email. Signature mismatch likely, 80% deviation from verified samples, possible forgery. I stared at the screen for a long time before moving. Velma had rewritten my medical history now. Quietly, neatly, like whiteout over my identity. After that, I needed air. I walked a few blocks to the bank. At the counter, I asked to check the status of my savings account. I'd been working since 16. Every paycheck, every dollar I tucked away was supposed to build something. The teller frowned. There's nothing in the account, she said. What? She tapped her keyboard. All funds were transferred to a joint account 6 months ago. Under the name Velma Hartley, it's listed as Family Planning Expenses. I thanked her without thanking her, walked out numb, every step heavier than the last. Back in my room, I sat at my desk and opened a new document, titled it If I Vanish. I wrote down everything. Dates, details, screenshots, created backups in 3 cloud accounts, encrypted and hidden. If anything happened, my name would not go quiet. She didn't need to scream to destroy me, I wrote. She just needed access. And I'd handed it to her, for years. Every time I looked away, stayed silent, tried to be the easy daughter. I had been complicit in my own disappearance. No more. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know what you found. Stop looking. I didn't panic. I ran a trace. The message had bounced off a cell tower less than a mile from my mother's church. There are prayers made with folded hands and threats whispered through folded hymns. The church smelled like lavender and starch, but not the kind that softened anything. It had taken me less than 15 minutes to trace the number, the call that said, "We know what you found." I didn't confront anyone, not yet. I just walked the corridors slowly, let the scent of pressed choir robes remind me how much this place once meant, before Velma hollowed it out and hung her name on the shell. I slipped into the back pew, eyes forward but ears working. I caught snatches of conversation, Velma talking to Pastor Clay in her tone so syrupy you'd miss the rot beneath it if you hadn't lived in it. Later that afternoon, she came home and found me reading on the porch. She stood there in her blazer and pearls and said, "You've been so tense lately. I thought maybe a spa weekend could help. Just the two of us. My treat." I marked my page and met her eyes. "A spa?" She nodded, too fast. "Somewhere nice, secluded. You deserve to relax." Velma never offers time, and she never offers gifts unless they come with strings. I agreed anyway. That Friday, we packed light. She drove. The road stretched longer than I expected, winding away from town and into the woods. When we pulled up to the retreat, it wasn't a spa. It was a cabin, upscale on the outside, but no sign, no check-in desk, no staff. She unlocked the door with a key she already had. Inside, it smelled like eucalyptus, or maybe something sharper. The bedroom had candles placed at symmetrical points on each surface, a white robe folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Beside the vanity, a compact camera on a tripod, angled, subtle, but there. Velma said she needed to make a call. I waited until she stepped out, then checked the bathroom. Under the sink, a bottle labeled ethanol, a box of waterproof matches. I looked up. The vent in the ceiling had a dot inside it, a lens. This wasn't a getaway. It was a setup. At dinner, I smiled, played calm. She served salad and roasted vegetables, humming to herself like a good mother in a detergent commercial. "I just wanted us to reconnect," she said, pouring wine, "before college takes you away." "You want me gone?" I asked, tilting my head. She laughed. "I want peace in the family." The recorder in my purse was running the whole time. We sat in silence long enough for the wine to settle. I let my thoughts drift back to the time I cracked my head open falling off a bike. I'd needed a transfusion. Zinnia had been a perfect match. Velma said no. "She's got state prelims next week," she told the nurse. "Marceline will recover." That was the first time I understood. Legacy mattered more than life. That night, I waited until Velma was in the bath. I unscrewed the candle lids, emptied the oils, filled them with tap water, switched the ethanol bottle with rubbing alcohol diluted with dye. Just enough to throw her plan off balance. Then I placed a decoy journal on the nightstand. Inside, false plans, phone numbers that led nowhere, the kind of bait she couldn't resist. At midnight, I pretended to sleep. At 4, I left. I drove back into town with the window cracked an inch, letting cold air keep me alert. I hadn't cried. I hadn't flinched. But I felt something rising in me, like pressure behind a dam. Halfway down the highway, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. "Zinnia. I don't know what you told her, but she's losing it. She said you're trying to ruin us all." Pause, then. "And Mom just bought something called an accident insurance rider. Early activation clause." My breath caught. Early activation? She was speeding up the clock. Some people leave you out of their plans. Others write your end date in ink. The drive back from the cabin felt shorter than the trip there. Maybe because my mind was moving faster than the car. Zinnia's voicemail played over and over in my head like a siren I couldn't turn off. Early activation clause. Accident rider. Velma wasn't waiting anymore, and neither was I. When I got home, I went straight to my room and pulled out the recorder from the spa trip, played it once, then again. Her voice was calm, collected. "I want peace in the family, before she leaves." It wasn't just a suggestion, it was an end date dressed as a goodbye. I opened my laptop and logged into the private server I'd set up weeks ago. Uploaded the recordings, the video of the will, unedited, and the scanned psychological file with the forged signature. Everything she'd tried to bury, I labeled with one simple title: "The Truth Burns Clean." Before sunrise, I pressed publish, but that wasn't all. 1 week ago, before the spa trip, Velma had staged an accident at home. A candle supposedly tipped over in the dining room. She posted a video to Facebook Live, holding one of my jackets and crying into the camera. "She's resting now," she sobbed. "Please pray for my daughter." The curtain had a small burn, easily explainable. But in the video, she didn't mention the curtain. She mentioned fire, trauma, hospitals. By the time I saw it, it had nearly 1,000 views. People from church sent flowers. The PTA set up a GoFundMe, all under the pretense that I was recovering in silence, too fragile to speak for myself. But I wasn't recovering. I had been shopping at CVS. The receipt said 6:14 p.m. The live stream went up at 6:21. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen while Velma sliced strawberries. Zinnia stirred eggs. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood at the entryway and asked, "Which hospital was I in when you went viral?" Velma froze, her knife pausing mid-slice. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, played the live stream, then played the footage from CVS, me standing in line for allergy meds, chatting with the cashier. "Convenient timing," I said, voice steady. Velma's mask didn't crack. It shattered. "You've always wanted to destroy this family," she spat. "No," I said. "I just wanted you to stop setting people on fire." Zinnia turned, wide-eyed, but didn't say a word. Just watched the kitchen unravel. Later that day, I sat in my room and remembered every ceremony, every award show, every family dinner. Zinnia tried to defend her. "Mom didn't mean it. She just wanted to protect our reputation." I laughed, low and bitter. "You wore the dress. I held the flashlight. You got the crown. I held the shoes." Zinnia crossed her arms. "Because you never asked for more." I met her stare without blinking. "Because I was never allowed to." She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I hadn't even raised my voice. That night, I opened my laptop again. One click. The podcast episode uploaded. The Fireproof One. It started with my voice, quiet but clear. I was never the accident, but I was always the risk. I laid it all out. The recordings, the documents, the contradictions, and the ending they tried to write for me before I even left the house. Within minutes, 300 plays, then 900. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. The house stayed quiet through dinner. No one spoke. The silence was different now, afraid, not dismissive. Then Velma's phone buzzed. She picked it up, stared. "What?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Church board?" I pressed. She nodded once. Her lips thinned into a line. Zinnia sat next to her, frozen, eyes glued to the open laptop screen. My podcast page. Her face pale. I leaned back in my chair. "I warned you," I said, calm as still water. "This wasn't revenge. It was preservation." Velma's phone buzzed again. A new email. She opened it. Her hand shook. I saw the subject line over her shoulder. "Urgent, investigation requested, insurance fraud case, number 147. They wanted fire, but I gave them something worse, exposure. Velma didn't speak when she read the subject line of the email. Her eyes locked on the screen, unblinking, as if she could erase it just by staring hard enough. Zinnia hovered behind her, her breath shallow. And me, I just watched from the hallway, the weight of 8 chapters worth of betrayal pressing against my spine like armor. The house was silent, not peaceful. Heavy, like smoke before the blaze. By noon, Velma had received an official letter from the church board, temporary suspension pending ethical review. That's how they put it, like she'd misfiled a communion waiver instead of faking her daughter's injury for insurance money. Whispers traveled fast in our church. Insurance audit. Fraud. She lied about the girl's accident. It didn't take long for Sister Mary Ellen to post a cryptic Facebook status. Some people play with fire, then act surprised when they get burned. I walked past Velma's room that afternoon and heard her on the phone. "I built this image," she hissed. "They can't erase me." Built, not lived. She wasn't mourning her family. She was mourning her reputation. That night, I sent the voice recording to the insurance board. I didn't attach my name. I didn't have to. Her voice played clearly. She's worth more if she's quiet. And if she's quiet long enough, the policy activates. I listened to it once more before deleting the file from my phone. Not out of guilt, but finality. I wasn't her daughter. I was her contingency plan. The next day, the podcast had made it to my school. My guidance counselor forwarded it to the administration, and within hours, the principal emailed me directly. "Marceline, we owe you an apology," it began. "We failed to protect you from misrepresentation in your records. An internal investigation is now underway." It was the first time my name had ever been acknowledged in official communication outside a grade sheet. Meanwhile, Zinnia was imploding. Her sponsors dropped her one by one. First the beauty brand, then the local clothing boutique. Her influencer page was swarmed with comments, screenshots of the live stream, the insurance investigation, her quotes layered in sarcastic captions. She cornered me by the laundry room. "You wanted this," she said. "You wanted to see me fall." I folded my arms. "I wanted you to see the ground you were standing on was me." Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. "There's nothing left to save!" she screamed as she stormed down the hall. I didn't follow her. For once, I didn't need to explain myself. By the weekend, the Fireproof one had reached over 500,000 plays. My inbox was flooded. Women, men, teenagers, people I'd never met, sharing their own versions of invisibility. Some had lived through the same thing. Others had stood by while it happened to someone else. One message stuck with me. "Thank you for setting your story on fire before they could." Late that night, I sat alone on the porch, a throw blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Crickets chirped in the distance, and for the first time, the silence didn't choke. It hummed, like something old making room for something new. Inside, I heard Velma crying, not loud, not performative, just a woman whose world had finally collapsed inward. And I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel joy either. Just space. Then my phone lit up. Voicemail. Unknown number. I hesitated, then tapped to play. A man's voice, older, familiar in a way I couldn't quite place, spoke softly. "We need to talk. It's about the policy, and your name's still on it. Not every fire ends with ashes. Some leave behind signatures, the kind you didn't write." I replayed the voicemail again, pausing every few seconds, dissecting every word. The voice was calm, careful, female. She introduced herself only once. "Margot, I used to work claims oversight, Savannah region." Then came the line that stuck to the walls of my room like mildew. "There's a policy, still active. Your name is on it. We should talk." We met the next morning in a quiet insurance office off a service road lined with forgotten strip malls and shuttered check-cashing spots. Margot was in her 60s, her blazer pressed, her eyes sharp behind reading glasses. She handed me a folder without small talk. "I was doing a post-claims audit for unrelated fraud when your name jumped out," she said. The same name, Marceline Drexel, listed on multiple beneficiary records. But this one had a trigger clause added just 3 months ago. I opened the folder. It was my name. My date of birth, my social security number, beneficiary, Velma Hartley. The policy wasn't just active. It had been altered. The new clause, immediate activation upon 18th birthday. "No consent form?" I asked, my voice level. "None that we could verify," she said, "but it's marked as digitally signed." I turned the page. There it was, my digital signature. But I'd never seen the form, let alone signed it. "They filed this 3 days after your podcast episode aired," she added, almost like they were racing the clock. I swallowed the rising heat in my throat. They kept me alive long enough to legalize my death. Back home, I compiled every document, bank transfers, forged medical records, and now this. I emailed them all to the attorney representing me in the insurance fraud case already brewing. 48 hours later, Velma was served a court summons. The active policy was frozen, the estate transfer halted. She didn't spiral publicly. That wasn't her style. But I heard her pacing the living room late at night. I saw the lights flick on in her bedroom at 3 a.m. Her shell was cracking. Not with shouts, but silence. I released another podcast episode, this one titled The Signature. I didn't rant, I didn't accuse, I simply walked listeners through the facts. She taught me fire was danger, I said, but I learned silence is deadlier when lit with truth. That line ended up trending, not because it was catchy, but because it was honest. Within days, the clip made it onto daytime TV segments, then a national morning show. I got emails from producers asking if I'd appear on camera for a docuseries on family fraud and generational control. I declined, left them a message instead. I don't need the camera. I already survived the fire. One morning, Zinnia stood at the kitchen island flipping through her phone. "They're saying your voice is hauntingly calm," she muttered. I didn't reply. "You really think this fixes anything?" I looked at her. It wasn't about fixing. It was about stopping the bleeding. The next day, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a photo. Me and my father on the beach. I must have been 5. He was crouching beside me, pointing to a seashell in my hand. On the back, scribbled in crooked ink, "I always knew you'd outlast the heat." I held it for a long time before putting it on the mantel. Velma walked by that evening. She paused at the photo, said nothing. I didn't need her to. There are victories that don't come with parades, just peace. And sometimes, that's louder than applause. I sat on my childhood bed one last time, the mattress now bare and sagging a little in the middle, like it knew I wasn't coming back. The walls around me were scraped of posters, framed certificates, and everything that once tried to claim I belonged here. Boxes lined the hallway, taped and labeled. The air smelled like cardboard and lemon polish. The silence wasn't menacing anymore. It was still, but not empty. It respected me now. Velma had moved out 2 weeks ago, as part of the court's asset freeze order. I hadn't seen her since. Her things, what hadn't been taken by the sheriff's office, were boxed and carted by Zinnia in a silent 2-hour visit. No words were exchanged that day, just doors opening and shutting, like punctuation marks in a story we were both tired of telling. This morning, I walked through each room alone. The dining room, where I once cleaned wax off the floor with bleach-soaked towels after a grief candle tipped and burned the edge of the rug. The kitchen, where I'd learned to boil rice by trial and error because nobody had ever shown me. And the living room, where my father's voice once echoed on VHS but had long since been overwritten by Velma's curated righteousness. "It doesn't echo lies anymore," I whispered to myself as I traced a crack in the molding. "It just echoes." I was wiping down the windowsills when Mrs. Pendleton from next door knocked, peeking in through the screen. "You moving out, sweetie?" she asked. I nodded. "Yup. Last day." She tilted her head. "I always thought you were the housekeeper's girl, not Velma's." There was no malice in her voice, just long-standing misconception. I didn't correct her. I smiled and said, "In a way, I was." I had scrubbed this house, arranged it, kept it moving while being ignored inside it. That counted for something, even if it never counted for credit. Just before noon, Zinnia showed up. She wore no makeup, no camera crew trailing her. Just jeans, a hoodie, and the tired face of someone who'd finally run out of denial. She didn't knock, just walked in and stood in the kitchen like it belonged to neither of us anymore. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "Good," I replied, turning off the faucet. She paused, staring at the empty space above the fireplace where Velma's family portrait had once hung. "We were just playing parts she gave us," Zinnia said. "You didn't have to memorize the lines," I replied. She looked down. "No, I didn't. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but we didn't yell either, and that, for us, was progress." That evening, I sat in the room one last time and wrote a letter. To myself, 5 years older, hopefully somewhere different. I wrote what I wanted to remember, to record everything, to trust silence only when it's earned, to never wait for permission to matter. I sealed it in an envelope and labeled it, "Only open when you feel invisible again." Then I locked it in a safety deposit box I'd opened in my own name. Before going to sleep, I logged into the podcast one final time. The original episode, the Fireproof One, was now listed in the resource section for 2 university ethics classes. Emails from survivors came in weekly. I didn't reply to all of them, but I read every single one. I updated the bio line on the homepage. No longer burning, still fireproof. The next morning, I turned off the lights room by room, unplugged the last lamp, closed the final box. I stood at the front door, folder tucked under my arm, phone in my pocket. The moving truck driver waved at me. I waved back. I turned around one last time and whispered, "Goodbye, house. You don't get to keep my story anymore." As I stepped onto the porch, my phone buzzed. A scholarship email. Subject line, "Congratulations." Full ride awarded, no signature from my mother, no check in her name, just mine. A future on my name, not hers. Some endings don't close a door. They swing it open, wide enough to let light in. I stood in the center of my new apartment, surrounded by blank walls and hardwood floors that hadn't yet learned the rhythm of my footsteps. It was quiet. Not the suffocating silence I knew back home, but the kind that waits patiently for laughter, music, and the scratch of chair legs. No echoes. Just space. I unpacked only 3 things first: my laptop, my father's letter, and a wrapped steak knife set I had bought on my own. Stainless steel. Full tang. Weighted, like they belonged to someone with permanence. A week later, I walked into the courthouse in downtown Charleston with my lawyer beside me. The hallway smelled of copy toner and institutional soap. The waiting benches were hard and my palms were steady. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Velma was already seated inside, eyes fixed straight ahead. Zinnia sat 2 rows behind, her posture less composed than usual, hair pulled back too tight, trying to hold together something long unraveling. When the judge called our case, I stood and walked to the witness box. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I listed everything: the fake documents, the altered policy, the mental health file with a dead doctor's name, the podcast, the live streams, the quote about me being worth more quiet. The judge listened carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was even, almost gentle. The court recognizes the fraudulent use of identity, psychological coercion, and attempted insurance fraud. All assets connected to the plaintiff's name are hereby frozen. Furthermore, Velma Hartley is barred from holding power of attorney or similar fiduciary authority indefinitely. She paused before adding, "The court acknowledges the survivor's independent credibility and the harm endured." That word, survivor, echoed deeper than any fire ever had. Later that week, on my birthday, I lit a single candle in my own apartment. No witnesses, no performative hugs, just me, a slice of cake, and the memory of my 13th when Velma told guests it wasn't appropriate to celebrate during Lent. The next week, Zinnia had a tiara, a pink dress, and 100 cupcakes. I'd helped arrange them in silence. This time, I lit the candle. For me, on my terms. A few days later, I hosted dinner. Just 4 people: my lawyer, Henrietta, James Donnelly, and Kaylani. I cooked steaks, medium rare, garlic butter crust, fresh thyme, each plate full, heavy, seasoned, and I set 1 extra plate. No name, just a seat across from mine, reserved for the girl I used to be, the one who wasn't invited to the table she helped build. In the background, a recording played over soft jazz, my voice. We are not what they called us. We are what we built ourselves into. After dessert, Henrietta pressed my hand. "You've done what they said couldn't be done." "I didn't burn it all down," I said. "Just the part that wasn't mine to carry." 2 days later, I received my student ID card in the mail. Full scholarship. Criminal psychology and ethics. I smiled at the name printed clearly across the bottom. Marceline Drexel. No middle name, no inherited brand. Just mine. I recorded 1 last podcast episode. This is my last episode. I don't need to stay fireproof anymore, because I'm not afraid of heat. I'm not afraid of silence, and I'm no longer afraid of the name I came from, because I rebuilt the one I'm going to. I didn't sign off with a quote or a goodbye. Just fade out. Weeks passed. I settled in, learned the walk to campus, the coffee shop that knew my order, the back route to the library. Life didn't feel like it was starting. It felt like I had finally arrived. One morning, I walked into a lecture hall where I'd been asked to guest speak. The dean had heard my podcast. Said students needed to hear what survival looked like without the dramatics. As I walked toward the podium, a student raised her hand. "What's this class about?" she asked. I smiled. "It's about what happens when the fire doesn't kill you." The lights dimmed, the room quieted, and I began.